So we'll start off with labelling the heart. So first off we have the pulmonary artery. This is here, and it brings blood, it takes blood to the lungs to be oxygenated. Next we have the left atrium, which takes in oxygenated blood ready to be pumped around the body. Inferior vena cava brings deoxygenated blood back to the heart to then be pumped to the lungs from sort of the bottom end of the body. Next we have the right ventricle, which holds deoxygenated blood. The aortic valve is the valve that stops blood coming back down the aorta. The right atrium again holds deoxygenated blood. When the pressure is released, it pushes through the valve into the right ventricle. Septum is this sort of muscular tissue which contracts and helps push the blood around the heart and around the body. The superior vena cava, it brings deoxygenated blood to the heart to be pumped to the lungs from sort of the brain and the upper body. Aorta is the biggest artery in the body, and it has thick walls, so more blood can be pushed out at a higher pressure. The semilunar valve is this valve here, and stops the blood flowing back down the pulmonary vein. The left ventricle, this holds oxygenated blood ready to be pushed up the aorta. Pulmonary veins, they bring oxygenated, or they take oxygenated blood away from the heart. The tricuspid valve is this valve here, and stops the blood flowing back into the right atrium. And the bicuspid valve has the same effect over here, but on the left hand side of the heart, so it stops the blood flowing back into the left atrium. Right, so now we're going to move on to the respiratory system. So first of all we have the larynx. So this is this area here. It's also known as like your vocal box. Then you have your bronchioles, which are these bits here, and they sort of branch off from the bronchi. The epiglottis, this is here. Alveoli, these are small air sacs that are used for respiration, for the diffusion of oxygen and carbon dioxide into and out of the bloodstream. The pharynx is this here. Bronchus, this is the two individual larger branches of the sort of anatomy of the lungs. Then you have the trachea, also known as the windpipe, and that just allows air to go in and out of the lungs. Finally we have the nasal cavity, where air is taken in and warmed up and moistened, and then it can go down to the lungs or it comes out during expiration. Next we move on to the PowerPoint. So okay, right. So we'll start off with the cardiovascular system. The heart. Oh, let's go back. The heart is a strong and powerful organ consisting of cardiac muscle. The heart pumps continuously without resting and without becoming fatigued. Its function is to pump blood to the lungs around the body. The heart consists of 4 chambers and is divided into left and right by a wall of muscle called the septum. The right side of the heart consists of an atrium which receives blood from a returning body, and the right ventricle which then pumps blood out to the lungs via the pulmonary artery. The left side again contains an atrium and a ventricle. The left atrium receives oxygenated blood returning from the lungs, and the ventricle then pumps the blood around the body. Due to the distance which the blood being pumped from the left ventricle has to travel, a more forceful contraction is required. For this reason, the muscular wall of the left-hand side of the heart is thicker than the right. The atria and the ventricles are separated by valves known as atrioventricular or AV valves. The purpose of these valves is to prevent blood from flowing back in the wrong direction. Following the movement of blood from the atrium into the ventricle, the AV valves snap shut, which causes the first heart sound of the heartbeat. Right, next we have veins. Veins are blood vessels which carry deoxygenated or very low levels of oxygenated blood back to the heart. The exception to this rule is the pulmonary vein, which carries oxygenated blood from the lungs back to the heart, ready to be pumped around the rest of the body. At tissue level, capillaries drain blood into venules, which are very small veins, which as they return to the heart merge into larger veins before reaching either the superior vena cava, if returning from tissues and organs above the heart, or the inferior vena cava, if returning from tissues or organs below the heart. The inferior vena cava is larger than the superior vena cava. These two large arteries merge and return blood to the right atrium of the heart. So a structure of the vein, here you have the tunica adventitia, the tunica media, and the tunica intima. The adventitia is a strong outer covering of the arteries and veins which consists of connective tissues, collagen and elastic fibres. Tunica media, this is the middle layer and consists of smooth muscle and elastic fibres. This layer is thinner in veins. And you have the tunica intima. This is the inner layer which is in direct contact with the blood flowing through the vein. It consists of smooth endothelial cells. The hollow centre through which blood flows is called the lumen. Veins also contain valves which prevent the backflow of blood and aid venous return. Next we have capillaries. Capillaries are the smallest of blood vessels and form the connection between veins and arteries. As arteries branch and divide into arterioles and continue to reduce in size, as they reach the muscles they become capillaries. Here the capillaries form a capillary bed, which is a vast expanse of very small vessels forming a network throughout the muscle. However, unlike veins and arteries, their main function is not transporting blood. They are specially designed to allow the movement of substances, mainly gases, oxygen and carbon dioxide, into and out of the capillary. Gaseous exchange. The oxygen carried within the red blood cells as oxyhemoglobin at this point dissociates from the hemoglobin and passes through the capillary wall into the muscle cells, where it is picked up by myoglobin, the muscle cells equivalent to hemoglobin. The oxygen can now be used in aerobic metabolism to provide the muscle with energy. The waste product produced during aerobic metabolism or respiration is carbon dioxide. Due to the lower concentration of carbon dioxide in the capillaries than the muscle tissue, there is a surge through the capillary wall. From here, the blood continues into the venules and the veins, which return the deoxygenated and CO2-rich blood back to the heart and then onto the lungs, where the CO2 is exhaled and more oxygen is inhaled. The structure of a capillary. Capillaries have very thin walls comprised only of endothelial tissues, cells, which allow substances to move through the wall with ease. Capillaries are very small, measuring 5 to 10 micrometers in width. However, the cross-sectional area of capillaries within an average-sized muscle would be larger than that of the aorta. This allows a fast and efficient transfer of oxygen, carrying red blood cells to the site where they are needed. The arteries. Arteries are blood vessels which carry blood away from the heart, all of which, with the exception of the pulmonary artery, carry oxygenated blood. The most widely known artery within the human body is the aorta. This is because it's the largest of all blood vessels and transports blood away from the left ventricle of the heart, where it branches into smaller arteries. As the arteries divide further, they become smaller and smaller until they are classed as arterioles. Arterioles continue to branch into smaller and smaller vessels. Once they have decreased in size below 10 micrometers in diameter, it is known as a capillary. The pulmonary artery is classed as an artery as it carries blood away from the heart. However, it carries deoxygenated blood. The blood it carries has travelled around the body and back to the heart, where it is pumped via the pulmonary artery to the lungs to release waste products and pick up more oxygen. Now we move on to the respiratory system. So, the upper respiratory tract, it consists of the mouth, nose and nasal cavity, the pharynx and the larynx. But first of all, the function of the human respiratory system is to transport air into the lungs and facilitate the diffusion of oxygen into the bloodstream. It also receives waste carbon dioxide from the blood and exhales it. The respiratory system consists of the upper and lower respiratory tracts. So I'll just list the upper respiratory tract again. The upper respiratory tract includes the mouth, nose, nasal cavity, pharynx and larynx. Each has a specific function to aid the flow of air into the body. The function of the mouth, nose and nasal cavity is to warm, filter and moisten the incoming air. The pharynx, the function of this is that it divides the throat into the trachea and the esophagus. There is also a small flap of cartilage called the epiglottis, which prevents food from entering the trachea. And finally the larynx. This is known as the voice box, as it is where sound is generated. It also helps protect the trachea by producing a strong cough reflex if any solid objects pass through the epiglottis. Next, the lower respiratory tract. This is made up of the trachea and diaphragm. So we have the trachea is also known as the windpipe. This is a tube which carries air from the throat into the lungs. It ranges from 20 to 25 millimeters in diameter and 10 to 16 centimeters in length. The inner membrane of the trachea is covered by tiny hairs called cilia, which catch particles of dust which we can remove through coughing. The trachea is surrounded by 15 to 20 C-shaped rings of cartilage at the front and side, which help protect the trachea and keep it open. They are not complete circles due to the position of the esophagus immediately behind the trachea, and the need for the trachea to partially collapse is to allow the expansion of the esophagus when swallowing large pieces of food. The function of the diaphragm is the diaphragm is a broad band of muscle which sits underneath the lungs, attaching to the lower ribs, sternum and lumbar spine, and forming the base of the thoracic cavity. Now we go into a bit more detail about lungs. Lungs are made up of bronchi, bronchioles and alveoli. The function of bronchi. The trachea divides into two tubes called bronchi, one entering the left and one entering the right lung. The left bronchi is narrower, longer and more horizontal than the right. Irregular rings of cartilage surround the bronchi, whose walls consist of smooth muscle. Once inside the lung, the bronchi split in several ways, forming the tertiary bronchi. Bronchioles. The tertiary bronchi continue to divide and become bronchioles. Very narrow tubes less than 1 millimeter in diameter. There is no cartilage within the bronchioles and they lead to alveolar sacs. Alveoli. Individual hollow cavities contained within alveolar sacs. Alveoli have very thin walls which permit the exchange of gases, oxygen and carbon dioxide. They are surrounded by a network of capillaries in which the inspired gases pass. There are approximately 3 million alveoli within an average adult lung. Respiratory volumes. So, we have tidal volume is the amount of air which enters the lungs during normal inhalation at rest. The average tidal volume is 500 milliliters, the same amount that leaves the lungs during exhalation. Inspiratory is the amount of extra air inhaled during a deep breath. This can be as high as 300 milliliters. Expiratory is the amount of extra air exhaled during forceful breath out. Residual volume, the amount of air left in lungs following a maximal exhalation. There is always some air remaining to prevent the lungs from collapsing. Vital capacity, the most air you can exhale after taking the deepest breath you can. It can be up to 10 times more than you would normally exhale. And total lung capacity, this is the vital lung capacity plus the residual